How did the giants called the Nephilim return after the flood? What was that? A little tease of 4 theories shared in this video. Some you've never heard, and one that makes a very strong case. So let's start off with the most unusual of the theories. There was one giant whom some Jews believed found a way to survive the flood. When you think of the biblical giants, you probably think of Goliath. But this giant was way more famous during the Old Testament period. And later Moses would lead an army against him. This mystery giant was mentioned in 7 different chapters of the Old Testament, while Goliath was only mentioned in 2 chapters. Can you guess who it is? King Og of Bashan. Just how monstrous was he? Well, that's still debated, but one thing we do know for sure. According to Deuteronomy, Og was the last of the giants called the Rephaim, a clan associated with the Nephilim. It's like real-life World of Warcraft. Yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. Jewish rabbis speculated that after surviving the flood, King Og single-handedly repopulated Canaan with more Nephilim. I don't really remember King Og being around before the flood. Yeah, that's because he's not. Or at least it's not explicitly stated. It's extra-biblical. Look, I know some people get a little nervous about the extra-biblical writings, but hang with me, there's a reason we're looking at this. Our little investigation will reveal some things everyone needs to know about the lost books of the Bible. Ancient people were trying to solve biblical mysteries just like we are. So in some of these books, they began to speculate. Our first 2 theories assume Og survived the flood, but they disagree on how he survived. So you're gonna have to make a decision. You get to decide which theory stays and which theory goes in our Flood Theory Elimination Tournament. Theory number 1. According to the extra-biblical book Targum, Pseudo, Jonathan. Hang on, nobody knows what that is. It's an old commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible. It says King Og survived the flood by clinging to the side of Noah's Ark. How did he sleep? That is a good question. Some people say he tied himself to the ark. How did he eat? Maybe fish swam in his mouth? Some people say Noah's family fed him, or even Noah, in exchange for Og being his slave. Maybe he fasted? How long was the flood? Okay, I can see that you don't find this theory convincing. So let's compare it to theory number 2. Ancient people who believed the flood was worldwide rather than, say, a very large local flood had a challenge. Water covered the earth for 150 days, and they knew the olive trees could not survive being underwater for that long. Or at least they wouldn't recover anytime soon. This left them with a challenge. How did the dove bring back a healthy olive branch so soon after the flood? There's actually 2 possible solutions. See my flood theory video for the other option, but the one we're interested in is this. Some Jews believed God supernaturally protected the land of Israel from the flood. Then, one famous teacher thought of a way that Og may have used this to survive. That Og just waited out the flood by staying in the land that would later be called Israel, which was supernaturally protected from the waters of the flood. So why didn't Noah just stay in Israel too? No comment. Viewers, which theory stays and which theory goes? Og clinged to the side of the ark, or Og stayed in the land of Israel in some kind of supernatural force field? I'm not sure I like either of those options. Yeah, but don't worry yet. I'll save the best theory for last. But what we can learn from these particular extra-biblical theories and books is they're basically from the equivalent of an ancient study Bible. You know those Bibles that have study notes in the margin? They give us scholars' opinions on how to interpret Scripture. Well, ancient people had basically a version of that. That's what some of the extra-biblical books are, especially the ones called the Targum and the Midrash. Their writers wanted to solve the Bible's unanswered mysteries, just like you and me. So they speculated, and they weaved their own theories into the Bible, making an expanded version. That creates a challenge for you and me, though, because we have to test these new ideas and see if they actually fit with the rest of Scripture. Some of the ideas in these books might just be a famous teacher's theory. So let's introduce theory number 3 from some writings that ancient Jews used for sermons called the Midrash. Peterat Moshe wrote that Og the giant was so tall that the floodwaters only reached his ankles. According to this legend, Og was able to just wait out the flood until it subsided. How tall was this guy? Well, that's the thing. Og was unusually tall in the Bible, but as time went on, suddenly he was 75 feet tall, and then someone later wrote that he was miles tall. On the other hand, they may not have intended for us to take these numbers literally. The bigger the enemy, the more powerful God seems when he defeats Og. Not that God needs any help to look better, but it's decision time. Viewers, which theory stays in the game? Oh, I don't like these choices. There's no time for decision paralysis. I'm gonna have to phone a friend. Harvey Dent, I believe in you. Help me. Okay, that's strange. He says we're gonna let the coin decide. Heads, Og stayed in Israel. Tails, he's gonna need a really good dermatologist for raisin toes. Here goes nothing. Heads. Og stayed in Israel. This coin has heads on both sides. This game is rigged. You must be punished. Fate has spoken. Theory number 2 stays in the game. King Og stayed in Israel, a protected space. All right. I think we owe it to our viewers to give them a legit theory, one that might actually hold some weight and holds up against the biblical text. George H. Pember wrote a book called Earth's Earliest Ages in 1876. In his research, he traced a few verses backwards and saw something very interesting. George found all of the verses about the Nephilim and the unusually tall people like King Og, who came after the flood. He traced their ancestry. A trail of Bible verses reveals something stunning. The biblical giants in the Bible can all be traced back to one man, Noah's son, Ham. There's no definitive proof, but because of this, some began to theorize that Ham or his wives carried Nephilim DNA on the ark. It's an intriguing theory that is supported by Scripture. If you want a chart showing all of the verses connecting the Nephilim to Ham, the whole lineage in Scripture, sign up for the email list in the description of this video. Now, some reject this theory because they'll say, well, if that's the case, if one of the Nephilim made it through the flood, well, then God failed, right? Well, that depends on what you think victory looks like. If the goal was to make sure the human race survives the threat of their own corruption and of the Nephilim, well, we're still here, right? To me, I feel like this means God's plan worked, even if some of the Nephilim survived or returned after the flood. The whole goal was to keep humans from destroying themselves or being destroyed by a threat like the Nephilim. That theory definitely wins so far. You're off the hook, Dent. Yeah, of the theories that we looked at, it's the one with by far the most evidential support. But there's 3 more theories on how the Nephilim returned after the flood, including 2 of the best theories yet. And the last one you just have to hear, trust me. To find out what it is, watch this video next.